to do this for. And it also had the advantage that it had the China Health and Nutrition panel data that span now almost 20 years. And we used this 15-year period to see what the dramatic changes in income growth, in income inequality, meant for income-related health inequality, again in self-assessed health in China for that period. And again, I give you the results immediately. I'm not going to show you any pictures. So what we find is that the income-related health inequality in China, as measured by that index, more than tripled. So although this may seem like a small value, it more than tripled over those 15 years. And we were able to show that it was not related to the double-digit income growth in China in that period, which was dramatic. It was only slightly related to the rising, also very much rising income inequality in the country. And almost all of it was due to the downward income mobility of certain groups. And in China, that proved to be the elderly women mostly, primarily the females, and also primarily in the rural areas. And what seemed to be going on is, or you could of course phrase it differently. You could also call it the upward mobility of the young urban professionals, young urban population, which moved more rapidly in income than the elderly. Now, in keeping with the tradition that Beatrice said yesterday and showing you some pictures, I found some pictures to illustrate the point. So this is what some parts of China look like these days. And this group, reflected by this picture here, benefited much more from the rapid economic growth than this group here, because these ladies are also still part of modern-day China, and they didn't benefit as much as the young urban professionals. So especially, I emphasize it's especially the women, so there was both men and women, but women much more than men, because they also in China live longer than men. And the problem appears to be that there's income support is lacking in old age. There's no pension system. If there was any pensions for those who had worked in the formal sector, it was males. And if there were any, it was mostly in the cities, not in the urban, non-coastal areas in China. And that group seems to be the left behind group. And that explains why in China the income-related health inequality has tripled over that 15-year period. Okay, that's China. Let's go back to, well, let me explain the decomposition in a nutshell, and I have to use a bit of algebra here, but that will be just 2 slides, and then I continue with the story again. So I have to explain that this is the main measure that we use. This is the so-called Erreger's version of the concentration index. It shows the cumulative distribution, or it's measured based on the cumulative distribution of health, conditional on income. And this serves to show that it can be written as a weighted sum of health levels of all individuals in your sample, weighted by a sort of a Z weight here, which is a function of the rank in the income distribution. That's going to be important in showing what we find. Now, we also use a little trick to split out the effect of total income change into income growth per se and change in inequality. So if incomes grow, it mostly means that the income distribution is moving to the right. So the spread may change, and the average growth may also change. So what we do is we compute a proportional income growth for every individual. So for every individual in period T, we assume that it experiences the growth, so that happens by multiplying that individual's income in the first period with the ratio of the mean of the population in the period T divided by the mean in the so this shows the growth on average in that sample, and we give every individual that growth. And that allows us to disentangle proportional growth for everyone versus the change in inequality. So that's what's said here. To decompose total income changes or shifts in the distribution, we decompose that into proportional growth, so while keeping inequality constant, and we can decompose it in a part that's the inequality change, taking out the growth bit. There's 2 other things. It also decomposes it into changes in the income ranking in the distribution. This is the term that I already alluded to in the Chinese example. And a fourth term, which I'll show on the next slide, that captures changes in characteristics. And I'll explain that a bit when I do the empirical example. So how can characteristics change? Well, it means that people grow older over the time, or that they change from an employment status, from employment into unemployment or into disability or other employment changes. Yeah? So this is the beast. This is the change. It's just an accounting identity. It shows the difference in inequality in period T in health levels, given conditional on income, minus the same inequality in the initial period, the first period. And in China, I think we had 5 or 6 waves of the panel. So you can do that wave by wave. And it shows that it can be written simply because of the definition of a concentration index, it can be written as the sum of 4 terms. And these terms look a bit hairy here, but they can be interpreted in in a sensible way. The first two here, 1 and 2, do this split that I just explained, a change in what's called the proportional income growth, and there, this functional form. I think I didn't talk about this thing here. So this is the functional form that we will impose, or that we will estimate. So this captures the nonlinear relationship between income and health. I'll say a bit more about it when we come to our empirical explanation. So that's crucially dependent on the functional form of this function phi there. And then if we look at the terms, then we see this, well, all of them are sort of weighted sums of changes. All of these 4 terms are weighted sums of changes. What's this change? Well, this is a change that I explained on the previous slide. It's the difference between the health that is derived from income Y for person I in the first period, and the income that that person would have gotten in period T if that person or everybody had experienced the same proportional growth as the population or the sample at large. So this captures proportional growth. That's why this is called proportional income growth. This one captures the other change. So this is, you can hardly see it. It's the difference between that proportional growth and the actual income, and then translated through the function phi into health levels and weighted by this Z factor. So this captures the effect of not getting the proportional growth, but some individuals get more, others will get less. So not everybody's, similarly affected in reality, of course, and that will create inequality, and that's why this is a mean-preserving change in income rank, which is captured there, and that captures changes in inequality. Then these 2 other terms here, term 3 and term 4, well, this is the one that captures mobility, and the way to see that is this difference between the Z variable in the first period and the Z variable in the period T is dependent on where that individual is in the income distribution in the first year and in a later year. And you should know that these Zs, they decline linearly with rank. So they're highest for the poorest person in the income distribution, and they become negative for at the median, and then they're lowest, most negative for the richest person. So that's important to interpret what the changes in rank do, and then that's weighted here by the effect that has, again, on health. So in this case, it's not the phi function of income, but it's weighted by the health effect of characteristic X, which could be a person's age, could be a person's region of residence, could be a person's employment status. Okay, and then finally, this captures other changes. This captures changes in the axis, and again, it's weighted by its health effect. And I already said, how can a person change a status? Well, by simply growing older, you can get into an older category, or by losing a job, you can get from employment into unemployment or disability or other states. Yeah? So to sum up, this measures term 1, as we will call it from now on, measures the effect of proportional income growth. Term 2 measures the effect of changes in income inequality. This is the effect of income mobility, and this is the effect of other changes in the X characteristics. Okay. Now, before I do this now with the European Silk data, let me just point out that we did try also to find other data for Spain. So we looked at the health survey, but the problem there with the Spanish health survey was that the latest release of the latest year doesn't have the income data, so we couldn't do it with that one. It's also not a panel. There is a Catalan survey that we could lay our hands on, and that's called continuous, but it's not a longitudinal panel. It's just continuously monitoring, and that allows you to split observations by year, but also by, say, half years. And that's what this measures. 2011 is the first half of 2011, 2011B is the second half, and 2012 is actually the first half of 2012, the first 6 months. And what this serves to show, this is, again, the concentration index of inequality in these three health measures here. So what's included there is the standard self-assessed health question. And this measures whether people report themselves in poor health. This is a sort of thermometer question where people rank their health on a thermometer. And this is the GHQ-12 index. What we can see is, if you compare 2006, so a pre-crisis year, and some of the post-crisis years, then if anything, we see so this is positive because this measures health positively. The thermometer measures health positively. So that's why the concentration index is positive. But if anything, it goes down in more recent years. And similarly, these are bad health measures like poor health and bad mental health. They behave a bit differently between 2006 and 2010. But since 2010, not much change in mental health. And again, a decrease in the inequality in poor health as reported by individuals by income. So not an increase, but a decrease. But this is just a Catalan survey. Maybe, people sometimes say Catalans are different from other Spaniards. So this doesn't tell us anything yet about what's happening in Spain. So go back to the decomposition that I just explained. What we need for that is a panel. So not the Catalan survey doesn't do that, and we don't have there is no health panel survey in Spain or in the other countries. What we do have is an income survey. Eurostat has produced a sort of follow-up on the European Community Household Panel. The only difference being that they don't keep households in there for all of the period, but they keep them in there for 4 consecutive years. So still enough to allow to follow households over time. And some of these have become available also since the 2008. It's also got health information, but of course it's an income and living conditions panel, so the health information is limited. But it's got this familiar question, self-assessed health, that I've spent a lot of my career working on. It's a very simple measure, but it's very predictive, as many of you know, of mortality, of other outcomes, healthcare utilization, disability, retirement, anything, you name it. It's a very predictive measure, despite all its faults and its simplicity. And we have that for, Eurostat has only released the latest year that's released for all countries is 2010, unfortunately, which is only 2 years after the crisis. And you have to realize that people report their income over the last 12 months. So even the 2001 observations, to some extent, report incomes that were earned in 2009 still, and the same is true for 9 and 8. Now, fortunately, Statistics Spain has released the next wave already for the Spanish SILT data. So for Spain, we have an extra post-crisis year, 2011. So it allows us to do slightly better. What I will do first is compare the 3 countries with the same years, and then later on I'll add in the extra year for Spain. Yeah? Well, the big question that we also asked ourselves when we embarked on this is it still too early to see any effects of the crisis? Because of the limitations I said, clearly end of 2008 the crisis kicked in, but before that translates into people's actual disposable incomes, that may take a while. Well, let's have a look. I have to say something about this income and health relationship that we estimated, because that's quite crucial in the whole exercise. So we make that self-assessed health variable, that simple 5-point categorical scale, a function of income and a number of other characteristics, which I'll explain in a second. This income function is nonlinear, and that's crucial for the exercise, and it's